Welcome back into another edition. Well, actually, no, I'm used to saying it. Welcome into the first ever edition of the Frontlines of Fantasy podcast, where we are doing something new. We are launching something new, and this is something that's kind of near and dear to my heart. We got the idea. There's a lot of podcasts out there that have done how fantasy analysts got their start, or the business behind fantasy. Well, this is something that's a little bit different, geared more towards the military, that I thought would be a really interesting conversation because if people don't know, I was in the military. I served in the United States Navy. I was on the USS Boone, and for me, we had a fantasy league in there, and it really brought us together, the camaraderie, and I feel like there's like a fusion, if you will, of somewhat of being in the military and fantasy football, right? Because you have your league mates and that the camaraderie you build there. So I just thought this was kind of like an interesting topic, for people that aren't in the military to know kind of what we do or what the people in the military do. Some interesting stories and stuff like that. So I reached out and we got a lot of good responses. And so our first guest, I'm really excited to have on. We have Kent Weyrauch. No, hold on. If I'm going to say it, Kent Weyrauch, right? Isn't that how we used to say it back in the day?
Nailed it. Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it, guys.
No problem. You can find him on Twitter at Kent Weyrauch, easy enough. And he used to be on the Fantasy Authority back in the day. And then him and the boys broke off and started their own and the Red Shirts Pod, right? And so they're killing it over there. But anyways, how are you doing?
Hey, I'm doing good, and honestly, I'm really glad that you guys decided to do this series of videos and podcasts because honestly, it's something that's really important, and you talked about the camaraderie that's involved in both the military and fantasy football, and it just goes hand in hand. So super excited to be here. I haven't been on a podcast in a little while. You mentioned I jumped in, went and did the Red Shirts Fantasy Football podcast for a little while, but I had a kid this last year, so I haven't had a whole lot of time for podcasting and writing articles and anything. So it's good to get back on the mic, and I really appreciate it.
Well, it's nice to hear your nice, soothing voice again. So it's good. But and I shouldn't leave out. We also have Cody on. Cody Kutzer. So you find him on Twitter at @CKutzer. But how you doing tonight, Cody?
Doing well, man. I'm gonna basically be the third wheel as you just kind of pushed me aside and brought me in. So I'm fine with it. I'm not. I have no military service, but I'm super excited to be able to learn more about it and hear stories and kind of learn from you guys. So I'm excited to chop it up with Kent and get this first one under the road.
For sure.
Yeah. So again, I really appreciate you coming on. Also, if people don't know, we are also teaming with. Why is it escaping me?
Wounded Warriors.
Help me out. Huh?
Wounded Warriors.
Yeah. Sorry. I'm an idiot. We are teaming with the Wounded Warriors as well, and we actually have
a very small charity that nobody knows.
Yeah,
we're hoping this is the launching point for them.
Yeah, so we're going to try to get them up off the ground. But anyways, we thought it would be good to in part in this because I do think that with the military there is a stigma for a lot of us and people that were in and you get out and you don't really want to talk about it, and there can be troubles with getting out and that transition from military to active duty or to civilian life. And there's not a lot of people to talk to because unless you have people that that we're in, they can't really understand it, and we are expected to kind of be tough. And so we kind of internalize it. So the Wounded Warrior Project is a really good foundation. They do a lot of good work. It's not just about people who are injured in the military and that are coming out. So we are excited about that. I think we have a goal set up at $1,500. We'll put the link in the show notes and everything for people to donate. And I think we're also going to be doing some shirts, and all the proceeds with that will also go to them. And we will... and you can get a shirt out of it too. So anyways, let's just jump right into it, right? So Kent, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself? Tell us what branch you were in, maybe a little bit about boot camp, basic training, stuff like that for you.
So I went into the United States Marine Corps in 2010, January 2010. I joined as a cryptologic linguist with a specialty in the Pashto language, which I know is something that almost no one has heard about. It's what they speak in Afghanistan, or at least parts of Afghanistan. So I was working in signals intelligence, listening to radio broadcasts and stuff like that, and doing translating and sending that off to intelligence, like dissemination teams and stuff like that. So a big part of what I was doing was pretty much wearing headphones just like I am right now, and transcribing conversations that I heard. And that was what I did both stateside. I was working overnight sometimes because of the time difference, as well as when I deployed to Afghanistan. I did a 7-month tour in 2013 into 2014. And that was pretty much it. Other than that, I was just in California, just kind of hanging out, playing video games, catching some sun, going out to the bars with all my buddies, and doing some of the more normal stuff. But I got out in the end of 2014, and after that I went to school at the University of Minnesota for statistics, and kind of started becoming a huge data nerd at that point in time. It was more of maybe a passion for me at the time, and I wanted to turn it into something I could do for a career. So I did that, got out of school, got a job at Great Clips, working for their corporate office here in the Twin Cities. And, unfortunately, due to COVID-19, a lot of salons had to shut down. I got laid off, but sounds like I might be going back there in due time. Just kind of standing by. And I mentioned that I had a kid recently. I've been spending a lot of time with him in these last couple months, and that's honestly been really awesome. And I don't think I'd trade that for anything else in the world. So I'm pretty positive about that. I'm feeling good about everything in general. Got to have some good vibes right now. Is that right, boys?
100%, right? 100%. We are living in a crazy time right now, and every week everything seems to change. I think if you would have told us 2 or 3 months ago this is where we'd be, I think everybody would laugh at you and like get out of town. So, so hopefully things are starting to look up and starting to get better there. So hopefully they do call you back. But in terms of people that were in the military understand some things, and that is one, that when we were in the military, we bust each other's balls. Okay, the branches, right? Every branch thinks their branch is the best. I don't know what the Coast Guard and Air Force are doing. Like they're certainly shouldn't be in the conversation, but they think they are. But I do know that especially the Marines and the Navy have a special bond of really busting each other's balls, right? I know I've heard, so I'm going to get out of the way so I don't have to hear it, because I know a couple of things I've heard are, one, that the Marines is the men's department is one I've heard because if people don't know, so the Marines is the department of the Navy. Okay. So Marines definitely don't like to hear that. They don't like to anybody tell them that because they think it's an insult. It shouldn't be, but that's what they think. And I've also heard that you got where you're Uber. So tell me some other funny jokes.
I was going to say chauffeur. So you're on the same line there. And honestly, I know we're the Department of the Navy, but it's kind of like a big brother, little brother thing, except we're the little brother that's way better at everything. So, we're the ones that the shining star in the family. And you're just kind of there. You're older, you're bigger, you got all the people, but you don't really do a whole lot. You just drive us around. You're 16, we're 14, but we're the star of the football team. So you got to drive us to practice. And that's kind of how I view the Navy.
Well, hey, we also can, drop a missile down your chimney from hundreds of miles away as well, where
that's true.
Not a lot of branches could do that either. But I will say this, that at the same time, even though we bust each other's balls, I can tell you this, that like it's okay for us to make fun of each other, but if I hear anybody else making fun of a branch, then it's completely different. And it's like, no, stop. You're not allowed to do that, okay? Just stop. Like, we're allowed to do it to ourselves, but not anybody else. So, anyways, I can tell you this, like, as being in the Navy, our boot camp was 8 weeks. I know your guys is longer. Now, I've also heard that I think there's this debate as well of which boot camp is the toughest. I definitely am not going to say it's the Navy's, because I know I've heard some of the stuff that you guys have done. So I'm not gonna sit here and try to say that it isn't. But what is boot camp like for you guys? Like, I know for us, when we first get in, it's like P days for the first week, and it is like mind-numbing because you have no idea what to expect. You show up, you all look like a bunch of riffraff because everybody's scared. You're yelling at you. They're telling you to go different directions. You have no idea what you're doing. You're trying to figure out what you're doing with your hands. And what is boot camp like for the Marines?
Yeah, I mean, the general concept's obviously going to be pretty much the same. It was 3 months for us, 12 weeks in boot camp. And when you first get there, it's like exactly what you say. yell at you and tell you where to go, but then that's the wrong place. And you got to go somewhere else, and you're not doing the right thing with your hands, and you're not doing the right thing. You're not looking in the right place. And they're just yelling. And it's just there to just get you desensitized to hyper things going on around you. You just need to be able to focus through all the stuff that is happening all around you. And that's, I think, one of the biggest components of it. So they're constantly trying to mess with you. And I think that first week or so, you're in kind of like a temporary bay, waiting to get started in your program. And they would have like these temporary drill instructors, and they'd give you, I think it was like 15 minutes, I feel like, maybe less. And you had to shit, shower, and shave all in that time. And that was all you could, you were running from left to right. And there was obviously like tons of guys in a bathroom that was way too small for that many guys, all over the place. It is honestly pretty disgusting, but you learn to kind of put up or shut up in the military, especially in boot camp. Obviously there's going to be PT every single day, and it's not just your regular PT, your regular jog. It's intense, grueling physical effort, doing push-ups until you're puking, running, sprinting. And if anyone falls out, you got to do it all again, because you're building that camaraderie, that teamwork aspect. You need to carry the guy with you if he's struggling. And if you're the guy running out ahead, you're just being an asshole because, you should be with your team and helping them out. So, that's kind of what it was like in boot camp. And, you learn how to do drill, you learn how to shoot a rifle, you do all this kind of stuff too, that goes along with it. But definitely the team building components of it were the biggest part, in addition to them desensitizing you to all the distractions that are going on around you.
What was the hardest part for you during that time, Ken?
Let's see. Well, when you're in boot camp, and also there's this extra part called Marine combat training. It's another month after boot camp. Between the two of those things, you go on 6 ruck hikes where you have like a huge, basically backpack on full of crap, and you just throw everything heavy in there. Like the set list that you have to put in there is all the heaviest stuff you own. And so it's like an extra 75 pounds on your back, in addition to wearing a flak jacket, carrying your rifle. You got a Kevlar on your head. The total weight's probably 85 pounds or something like that. And you got to go on these, 5, 10, 15-mile hikes. And across the way, there's always these huge hills. California is known for having these big rolling hills. So you're walking with like 85 extra pounds on you. And you got to be going the same speed that the rest of the company is marching. And you're going up this incline that's like 45 degrees, I swear. And maybe it's not. Maybe that's just like a light bulb memory. Like I felt like it was that steep, but it felt really steep. And you're like practically putting your hands down in the dirt. You're going up such a steep incline. And so these things go on for what feels like an eternity. And then after you get done with that hill, then you realize you got like 8 miles left to hike. And you're like, why did I do this? I made a mistake joining this, but you make it through. You just put your head down, you keep grinding, you make it through. And I look back, I got out of the military like almost 6 years ago now, and the time just flies. And so, kind of in a similar vein to what we're going through right now. Hey, it's bad times, but just keep grinding, just keep your head down, keep going. We'll all make it through it. No problem.
Yeah, I know. Well, you guys definitely have it worse than what we had. There wasn't a lot of that, and they've gotten it easier now. Like I can't speak to so much what it is now because I was in from 2004 to 2008, and now like most of where they all sleep is all air conditioned. We didn't have that. We had no air conditioning. They're all like air conditioned, and I've heard these stories of like stress cards, like which blows their mind. And stuff like this, like I don't know, like that stuff seems wild to me. We didn't have to do a lot of that. Like we had to march everywhere we went. We had a lot of different school that we had to go to. We had to learn how to like march in formation and all this stuff. But like I feel like though that the Marines and the Navy are a little bit different in the aspect of like for the Navy you're preparing that person to do somewhat of that job of what they're going to. Like I feel like the Navy is a little bit more like a little bit more real world because like, you know, you have your, like, I was an engineman, and so I worked on the, you know, all the mechanics of the ship, and you have people that, you know, are cooks, and you have people that just paint the ship, and like, I mean, there's much more, you know, intricate jobs than that, you know, topsider stuff and all that stuff. But whereas the Marines is a little bit different, and I feel like that's why it's a little more justifiable to have, you know, a little bit crazier, because, you know, you guys are going to be out there on the front lines of things and asked to do a lot more than, you know, us. Like, we're way far away. If people get to us, like, we're in a different kind of situation than what you guys are going to be on, right?
Yeah.
So I do think that, you know, those are the differences. But I do remember boot camp like it was yesterday. I remember the very first day of boot camp. I'll never forget it. And it was a pretty wild experience. Now, so I don't know if you've already. I think you may have already asked, but like for us, like when we get out of boot camp, we go into what's called aid school, and they send you to either Chicago or Fort Lauderdale, and there's a couple other ones where people might go, because for us, we're broken up into firemen, enginemen, and airmen. And or firemen, seamen, and airmen. And so we go to different places to go to our school, right? So you go to A school, and that's how you kind of learn the basics of your job. Do you guys kind of have that, or like after boot camp, I assume, for you to learn what you're going to be doing?
Yeah, no, I touched on the MCT, where you do some follow-up weaponry training with like light and medium and heavy machine guns, and we did like the grenade launcher and stuff like that. And then after that, I went on to my MOS school, which was in Monterey, California, so not a bad gig. And I was there for like a year and a half because I had to learn a language. So I went to the Defense Language Institute. It's a school technically, but it's only military. And so they have classes there where they had, you know, nationals from all over the world come in and teach their language. They had native speakers for every single language that they taught there. So all my teachers were from Afghanistan or at least nearby. And, you know, sometimes they move around in that region. So everyone was a native Pashto speaker. And so it was kind of interesting in that regard. So I studied that for a year and a half, or maybe a little bit less, more like a year. And then I did some follow-up training on signals intelligence in Texas. And that was at an Air Force base. And then that was about 6 months. And then from there, I went back to Camp Pendleton as my duty station.
It must have been a complete culture shock going to an Air Force base, because like it's kind of the joke that Air Force travels in style, and you know, they spend more time on the golf course than they do anything else. I mean,
yeah. That base was really nice. I mean, they have they don't spare any cent when they go spending on their base, and they go all out. So the food was great there, at least. You know, I was happy with that. Got practically a buffet every single day. I probably ate too much, if we're being honest, but it was nice.
No, yeah, I hear that. So yeah, I just always think that's funny. So you did this. You went on deployment. Where? So you went on the one deployment?
Yeah, just the one. Mm-hmm.
Okay, and where did you go, and how long was it?
So I was in the Sangin district of Afghanistan, which is in the southern region. Obviously, one of the places where they speak Pashto mostly. I was on a forward base called. I should really know this off the top of my head. It'll come to me. Anyway, we're on a little forward base. We're with some Afghan National Army units. And we had about 50 Americans. About half of us were officers, because they were kind of like an auxiliary force to kind of guide the Afghan National Army to reclaiming their area, because they had kind of lost control. And that was in the time when we really started to first dial back out of Afghanistan. So these officers were kind of helping the Afghan National Army with taking their region back over. And so there were some, you know, Marines, and my team was 5 guys. We were the signals intelligence team. So we kind of were there to report on the area, make sure nothing nefarious was going on, and that everything was safe and locked down. And, you know, honestly, for the most part, it was pretty boring. I talked about this with you before the show. A lot of the time I was just listening to people just talking crap on the radio to each other, like just bros being like, "Hey, what's up, dude? Screw you, man. Like, get out of here." You know, stuff like that. I mean, it's just most of it's nonsense. But honestly, it's fine that it's boring. We only had a couple of kind of scary moments, and then the rest of it was pretty low key, because, you know, they had kind of heard that we were going to be getting out of Afghanistan. So like, why would we go attack the Americans? Like, if they're going to be leaving, we can just let them leave. You know, if we attack them, they'll stay longer. So that's pretty much all I did. I sat in a tin can with some jerry-rigged air conditioning. Actually, it was both super cold and super hot. in Afghanistan. Obviously, it's like a desert climate. So in the winter, we did get some snow. And then right as I was leaving, it was like 120 degrees. So it was all over the place during my time there. Yeah.
No, go ahead. Well, I was gonna say I had a friend that was he was actually in the Navy, but some Navy personnel do get deployed over to Afghanistan, and he was over there. I think as a mechanic and stuff like that. But I know whenever he got back, he told us all about like how he came back here and it was 90 degrees out, and he flew back from Afghanistan to here, and he put on a hoodie when he got back because of how hot that it is over there, and like people just kind of don't understand how how hot it is over there and everything else. I couldn't imagine living there. Like, I'm not a huge fan of the heat. I would, as I've gotten older, I prefer it a little bit more to the cold. But like that kind of heat would be horrible because I sweat my ass off just walking. That's how I've always been. My dad's the same way. And so that would just be the absolute worst. I feel like your balls are always stuck to your leg and everything else. It would just be horrible.
Yeah, and anyone who knows me or doesn't know me, I guess, I'm from Minnesota, so the cold weather is totally fine with me. Obviously, I'm very hairy. I'm warm most of the time, no matter what. So I was cool with the snow. I had a guy on my team who was from Florida who had literally never seen snow in his life, and so that was the first time ever for him. And he's all bundled up in his snowsuit, and I just had like my pants on, and I was relaxed. Or he's like, "How are you doing that? It's so cold." I was like, "This is what I'm used to." And then obviously later, he got it back in spades when it was 120 out, and I was like just sweating, dying. And he was like, "This is what I'm used to." So it kind of went back and forth.
No, yeah, for sure. So but that's a good thing that you didn't have to really experience anything, traumatic or crazy over there because, there's a lot of people that don't have those stories. So
yeah.
But no, I think that's really cool. And like, I guess for a lot of people, I would assume that you probably think of the Marines. For a lot of people, just think of you guys are like grunts, right? You guys go over there, as frontline guys. And so I think that's an interesting aspect of the Marines that a lot of people don't really think about or talk about. I guess is that all the other different jobs that go into it to really kind of make the team run, right? Because that it's the same aspect as like I said on the Navy, but I think for the Marines and the Army, it's kind of always the same thought of, okay, you guys just go over there, you guys are just grunts on the ground, and that's not really the truth. And I think that, something like this is also, I think, a cool thing to be able to kind of peel back the curtain a little bit so people understand a little bit more of what you guys do.
Yeah. And honestly, oh man, I just lost my train of thought like completely. What were you just talking about? Say it again. What was the topic? Just give me the topic one more time.
I was just saying that how people look at you guys like you guys are all
okay.
grunts.
All right, I got it. I'm back. Okay. Yeah, and honestly, that's a pretty common misconception. It is that they think Marines are a bunch of meatheads. And for the most part, they're right. But there's definitely small subsections of the Marine Corps, kind of like with what I did, where it was more like a typical job, and I wasn't just running in, firing, gunning, and doing stuff like that. But a good chunk of the Marines is the grunt force, because that's what we're known for is kind of charging in and seizing locations, bases, what have you, and kind of mixing it up. So, but I was definitely more the occupational side of things. So once we already had a place, then I was there to make sure everything was still in good shape. There were some guys who did what I did, and they'd go out on convoys, and I did this a couple times, but really it was only like 5 times. But all they did was go out on convoys with the grunts, and they would listen in the vehicles for surrounding stuff while it was going on. And so that was kind of fun to do that a few times, but definitely not something I'd want to do all the time, because I had a few buddies that did get shot at and stuff. Luckily, no one got hit, and everything ended up fine. But that stuff's scary, man, and I'm glad I didn't have to deal with that.
No, for sure. I mean, that's kind of the stuff that's that you don't want to see, and that's pretty scary. Is there anything about it that what would be the stuff that you say that you miss the most about it?
Oh, being in such close quarters with guys who you work with every day. You definitely have the flare-ups. People get heated sometimes. It's going to happen. But there is nothing like the friendships that you have with those guys, especially on the deployment. You guys, you go back and sleep in a cot at night in a huge tent full of it was 16 guys in a big long tent. and you set up with like blanket walls and stuff just to have a little bit of extra security. But there were nights where we'd take it all down and we'd play board games until midnight, 1 a.m, even though we had to be up at 4:30 or whatever it was to start working again. Because you just you had to get your mind off things a little bit, and you just had to bond with them, and it's unlike anything else. You have friends in college, and I'd say it's pretty close to that same kind of friendship as college friends. But there's just that extra layer of you have to be relying on this guy, and you have to have like a bond with this guy. And if you don't, it can go sour real fast if things get hot. So, being able to trust these guys and be friends with these guys and work with them, it's unlike anything else. And I don't really know how else to explain it, honestly.
I would completely agree. I think for me, like, those are the things that I miss the most, is just the experience, the camaraderie that you build with these people. Because essentially, well, it's not essentially, you spend more time with these people than you do your own family. You see them every day when you're on deployment. That's literally your family. That's the only people you ever get to see.
Yeah.
How does well, for us, we call it Liberty, but like for when you guys go out on town, like do you guys get that while you're over in Afghanistan, or you're just limited to base?
No, we were, especially with where we were, if we left base, we were in the middle of the desert. So
did they have stuff where they would provide you guys beer, or like have cookouts or stuff like that?
No beer. Well, so okay. So we were on this little tiny base, but there was Camp Leatherneck was like the big military base. And that's where we flew into before we went to our small one. Oh, Camp Nole. That's where I knew it would come to me. Camp Nole is where I was. But in order to get to there, we had to fly into Camp Leatherneck, which was the big one. And it had British forces and a whole bunch of other different countries had their forces stationed there, for different ops and stuff. So, on the British side of the base, they were serving beer. We were not allowed to get it. None of the American troops were. But they did have some good services on Camp Leatherneck. That was a pretty big, nice, well, relatively nice anyway, area that, I was there for maybe like 2 weeks when I got to Afghanistan, and then like a month or so before I left. So probably 6 total weeks I was on the nice base, and then the rest of the 6 months I was in the crappy one in the middle of nowhere. But at least having that little bit of time at the nice place was all right.
Yeah, I mean, for us, because I went on 2 deployments, and one was like South America, and then the other one was like a med cruise, basically. And you stay out for like 30 days at a time, and then you would hit a port. We'd be there for like 2 or 3 days, which was just debauchery, and because everybody you've been locked up for that long, so everybody's going straight to the bar. But yeah, so I was always curious kind of how that worked for you guys. But that makes sense that obviously you're not going to be going out on town like, hey, what's up, guys? Like,
yeah, just go hang out with some of the locals.
Can I get your finest lager, or is that cool, or
or goat's milk, whatever you got, really, I'll take it. But on Camp Leatherneck, they did have like a USO setup where they had like some video games in there and stuff. And you could go hang out in there. There was like some restaurants and stuff sort of on base that you could go to as well. And we could go do that in our free time after work hours. But I mean, still you're stuck, kind of on base, so to speak.
Yeah. I mean, that makes a lot of sense. So, I guess too as well. I mean, you had mentioned in our talk before this that you are in a fantasy league with some people that you deployed with.
Yeah.
Is this something that you guys ever did while you guys were deployed, or was this something that was after you kind of got out and everything you got back when you guys set this up?
No, honestly, for me, it was after I got out. I didn't really start playing fantasy football, honestly, until I got out of the military that next year. I had kind of paid attention to the NFL and watched games and stuff, but never really got into fantasy. And then there was an open spot in some of my other leagues, and I jumped in, and obviously I was hooked. If I'm here now, so. But I did start up a league with I think it was, so let's see, it ended up being 3 of the guys from my team, and then 2 or 3 other guys that also deployed at the same time. And then another handful, a couple of guys that were also in the Marines that some of the other guys knew, a little bit of a spider web, but certainly 5 or 6 guys that were close friends of mine. And I deployed with them and I hung out with them a lot when we were back in California and all that. So it was a good way to stay in touch with them after I got out. And with some people already, I've kind of lost touch with them. I haven't, I see maybe them on Facebook or something, but even that I don't use very much these days. So, reaching out and being able to talk with someone, even if it's about fantasy football, it's good to catch up with them. And we met up in Vegas a couple times since then, and gotten together and hung out. We went to Lake Tahoe last year for a bachelor party. That was really fun, and it's good. I don't know if I didn't have the fantasy league, I don't know if we would have done those things after I had gone out and moved back to Minnesota and maybe lost touch. You never know. So having the fantasy league there to kind of connect us over time has been awesome. Not to mention I've won that league 3 out of the last 4 years. So I'm raking in the cash because these guys are just deep pockets and nothing else. But other than that, it's still really fun. They'll put up a fight eventually, maybe.
Hey, maybe they should tune in sometime. We'll help them out. Try to get that dub.
Yeah.
But no, so I've mentioned, like, when I was in, we actually did a league, which was tough, right? Because like I said, I was in from 04 to 08, so you can imagine the internet wasn't great here, like in the States. So imagine the internet on a ship out in the middle of the ocean. It was horrible. Like, it would take just to get to ESPN, it would take 20 minutes to log in, and so there wasn't a ton. Like, if you wanted to make a move, you had to really want it to be able to get on there and make it, because you weren't just running on there grabbing the waiver wire. It'd take a while. You might be waiting. You put in that waiver claim, you're waiting for 20 minutes and hoping one of you get it first before the other one, right? But the parts about it that I love was basically because we'd be on the mess decks or whatever, getting ready to eat or whatever. And we'd sit down and we'd talk about trades and stuff like that, or hey man, I'll tell you what, dude, I will. You throw me Jamal Charles, right, and I will stand 2 of your next watches, and stuff like that, trying to sweeten the pot and stuff like that. Whenever, so there was a lot to it, but in the end, what it really did was a big morale boost for us, because when you're stuck out in the middle of the ocean, when all you see is the ocean for 20 to 30 days at a time, you start to lose your mind a little bit, because you go outside, it's still ocean. People think the ocean's beautiful until you live on it, and then you're like, okay, this is getting kind of old. I want to see something different. Yeah. And so anyways, it was a big morale boost. And for us, when you're over in the Mediterranean, it's an 8-hour time difference ahead. Mm-hmm. So NFL games are starting, the night games, it's late. It's midnight. Monday night games are starting at 4 or 5 in the morning, stuff like that, And so you had to really want it to stay up and watch football, but we did. The mess decks were always busy. People were always sacrificing their sleep to be able to stay up and watch it, because it's the little things that you take away to be able to watch. So you have Armed Forces Network, which is what all of us watch.
Yep.
And so that's what we would do. So with me, fantasy football was something that I always felt I was like I said, it was a big morale booster. And so I know that's one of my biggest always takeaways from fantasy football is still the same, is that how it kind of builds that same camaraderie of people. When you have those live drafts, you show up, you all bullshit, you bust each other's balls the entire time. It's different, obviously, because we're not going out to fight a war or anything like that. But at the same time, I think there's aspects to it that are similar. So, yeah. So I think that's an interesting thing, and I think it's cool that you guys are able to do that and kind of keep things, keep in touch through that as well, because it's just another aspect to be able to do that.
Yeah, and you reminded me of something. If you think you're in a league right now with some of the best shit talk you've ever heard in your life, you have nothing on a military league. You have absolutely nothing on it. I promise you. I will upload my group text. No, actually, I probably shouldn't. It'll probably be incriminating, but it just gets awful and dirty, and we're all just scoundrels when it comes to this stuff. And because you get hyper competitive, because that's how all of us are, obviously. Everyone who's gone through the military is competitive to some degree. So when you're going head to head, watching football, texting each other the day of the game, Sunday, it's just nastiness. And it's super fun though, obviously, because it's the same way me and Kevin like to crack jokes. It's good at the end of the day, and we know it's all for fun, and it's just it's something that no other league has, I promise.
Ken, you gotta give us a little preview. What's one of the worst things that you have said that you can share? What's one of the worst things that you have said in terms of the shit talk to somebody else?
Oh, you're putting me on the spot. Wow, I should have prepared for this show. No.
I
let me
mean, I
think.
should have too because I didn't know I was going to ask it
No,
until
that's
right
fair.
now.
That's
So,
fair.
is there anything that sticks out to you, or maybe not nothing you said, but is there something that you guys always like joke about, like, oh, you're going to say this again? You know what I mean? So anything like that?
Oh man, I'm gonna struggle to remember something right now.
Probably something about somebody's mother or
Yeah.
something like
those
that.
those are the common ones. I was trying to avoid. I was trying to avoid like maybe the obvious ones. Those happen pretty commonly.
Yeah, it's just a regular Wednesday, right?
Well, okay, so there's a guy in our league who is Mormon, and we all make fun of it, and he's cool with it. He's fine with it. But anytime he gets a win, we just like to we like to say, "Oh, you only won because you wear magic underpants," like every other Mormon does. That's the only reason you won. You got magic underpants on. You cheated. Get your magic Mormon powers winning your game for you every week.
That's great.
I don't want to. I'll have to look, see if I can find anything else later, maybe. But that's one that just comes to me off the top of my head.
Yeah, I think that really prepared me for the real world, though. Once I got out, was the amount of shit that people could talk, and because you have people from all over the world, or not all over the country too. So if you're like, for me, I came from a small town in Missouri where it was predominantly white. So being put into that, like, I think it just adds that extra layer of like not culture, but being around people's different where you're not used to being around people and environments, I guess, and then you bring all that together, and it can make for a lot of shit talking. And you better be prepared, and you become very quick-witted very quickly, or you're going to get your feelings hurt.
Yeah.
So
I'm scrolling through my group text right now, so if I find anything good, I'll let you guys know.
So I guess as well, after you got out and you decided was that always the plan for you? Is that you just wanted to do the 4 years and then get out and go to school, or?
I didn't really have a plan. I'll be honest, I went into the military because I did fail out of college. I went to St. Cloud State for a year and partied a little too much. And there's some other Marines in my family. My dad, my two uncles, my grandfather, all Marines. So, there was kind of some influence there guiding me towards it, and that's okay. I think it was one of the best choices I ever made in my life. But I didn't really have a plan once I joined. I was just kind of there to set myself on a track and figure out what that track was along the way. So I kind of just ended up making that decision, 3.5 years into my, actually I was on my deployment when I had to make the choice. And I said, I've put in my time. I served my country. I got my GI Bill waiting for me when I get out. Use that. That thing is amazing. Oh my God. If you ever want to go to college, just join the military. It's not that hard, I promise. But the GI Bill, definitely was worth it. And so I, then just switched to something I wanted to do in school, and here I am.
Yeah, I think that is always a misconception. There's always a lot of people that are like, "Oh, I couldn't be in the military. I can't handle people like telling me what to do or yelling at me." And I'm like, it's not really like that. Like, at least like the Navy, and I'm sure the other branches are the same. Like, once you get past boot camp, once you get past all that stuff, and you're actually just it's not really like that. People aren't sitting there screaming at you all day. Like I said, in the Navy, it's much more like a job. I mean, obviously, when you're captain or something like comes down, it's like you obviously have some sort of fear there because obviously that guy, the power the guy has and everything. Stuff like that, but at the same time, it is much more like a job, and there are some benefits to it. Now, obviously, there's negatives to it as well because most jobs you're not on deployment for 6 to 8 months, and some different situations that you get put in and stuff like that. So, and obviously, other branches is completely different. You are cashing a check up to your life, right? And that's what we do whenever we join. So obviously there's differences of it, but I always think that's something that people always say. I'm like, yeah, I'm pretty sure you could do it. Like, it's not, it's I mean, unless you're just not somebody that like you're a homebody, you never want to leave, stuff like that. Like, I joined the Navy. My main reason for joining the Navy was because I wanted to see the world, and I knew that was going to be my best opportunity to see as most places as I wanted to. So that's the reason I joined the Navy,
and get paid to do it too.
Yeah,
And I tell you what, there were some like softies in my boot camp platoon. I mean, straight up, like they were crying and stuff when shit hit the fan. Like, and they ended up making it through, and they're a little bit more lenient in that regard once they got to the end of boot camp. Probably still a little bit on the softer stuff, but it's not. And I mean this completely seriously. It's not that hard. If you think you aren't physically up to the challenge, you will be by the end of it. I mean, I went from doing like two pulls to 3 months or something. I ran like a 19-minute 3 miles. I was in the best shape of my life when I got out of boot camp. It was unbelievable. And they'll get you there. They will.
Oh, for sure. I mean, I know it's not as crazy as it was in like Full Metal Jacket, but it's not that. But I mean, I know we had a guy we had a guy in our division who he was way overweight when he came in, and I don't like. Most people didn't think he was going to make it because you have to like still hit a standard by the time like right before graduation and stuff like that. There's certain things that you have to do, and I think a lot of people didn't think he was actually going to make it, and he did. So,
did I leg out? My back?
Yeah, I wasn't sure if it was me. I'm like, was it me or was it him? I don't.
All right, yeah, I missed whatever you just said there.
It wasn't important, to be honest with you. It wasn't all that.
I didn't catch it.
Yeah, it wasn't that big of a deal. So I guess before we kind of wrap this up a little bit, what made you, I guess, want to pursue fantasy football? Was it just you got into it and you started enjoying it? And do you draw any parallels between the military and fantasy or the fantasy community or whatever?
Yeah, so I got into fantasy football. As I said earlier, I went to school for statistics, and so some of the first stuff I started doing with the skills that I learned there was taking fantasy football data, and stuff like that. It was my first year playing fantasy football. I started building models and graphs and projections and charts and all sorts of stuff, and obviously it started working for me. And I had some success in the fantasy football realm. So a couple of years later, I came in for the 40 fell. I hopped on the podcast. I enjoyed that a lot and reached out to some other places, got some paid work going on there. And so it was kind of fun doing something that I wanted to do, got a little bit extra, spending money, nothing much, but something just to keep you going. And I was able to use kind of the skills that I learned in school, and I got to do something that I loved, and it was just a great combo. So one thing that I really like about fantasy football is that it keeps groups of people together. And so, not only do I have my military league, also when the fantasy footballers first started out as a podcast, I listened season 15. I started listening to them. And I started, it was 12 guys at the time, including myself. I decided to commission a league for members of the podcast, other listeners of the podcast. And we are still to this day going, and we also started a separate dynasty league. We've had a couple of people kind of change in and out, but it's always been a replacement listener of the league, listener of the Fantasy Footballers podcast. So it's really cool that you can just have this tight knit group of people. Well, I've never met any of them in my life, but now I would say to some degree we are all friends, just playing fantasy football for 5-6 years. And so it's kind of cool that fantasy football can do that. And we all have the same exact hobby, and we're just communicating through it, kind of a thing. And so I relate that to the military and saying that, I didn't necessarily do the same job as everyone else there, but, I was working with my team of 5 guys or my 50 Americans that I was with on the deployment. We're all doing the same thing together, a little bit more, a little bit less volunteer in this case, but certainly we're all in it together. And so we kind of had that understanding with each other. And so if you met anyone in the chow hall, you could sit down, have a conversation with them, talk about, what's going on, they get any letters from back home, any care boxes, anything like that. There was always something to talk about because you just had these shared kind of interests going on at the same time. And so that's exactly like fantasy football. And so using that in tandem, having my league with the guys that I deployed with has just been awesome. It's been a continuation of the same exact kind of congruency we had when we were serving together. So it's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree more. I think that is what sort of after I got out and everything else, and once I kind of settled down, because I had a little, I still thought I was still in the military, at least with the drinking and everything else. Once I got out, I finally settled down a little bit, and yeah, I mean that was one of the reasons why I did, and I think that is a really good point about of everything and how it all kind of correlates in some certain way. So
No.
I guess with that, I guess let's actually talk about a little fantasy, right? Before we wrap this thing up a little bit, right?
Sure.
I mean, we can't have a fantasy, something about this without, talking about fantasy. So I know it's been a little bit, but who is one player okay, I got a couple for you. Who is one player that you want to come away with every draft you're in with?
Oh man, right now it's looking like Kareem Hunt. I thought at the end of the year for the Browns last year, he was looking really strong. And that was even with terrible play calling and a temporary coach after Kitchell got fired and all that stuff going on. They got Stefanski in there. He's my guy from Minnesota. You might remember he was our OC last year, and we had a large amount of success offensively speaking. So if I can see that translate over to the Browns offense, where arguably they have a top 5 talented offense roster, excuse me, you can see that translate to everyone who's on the field. It could be Chubb and Hunt. We've seen backfields before where both guys are getting tons of work, and obviously Hunt has that PPR value there if you're in any sort of format like that. I'm seeing him looking like he's going in like the late 6th round right now, and so you're talking, he could be your running back 2, and you can load yourself up with a couple top tier wide receivers or something like that, maybe a big tight end like Kelsey or Kittle or something, and still get Hunt as your running back 2. I'm sold on that. I've gotten him in a lot of best ball drafts so far this offseason. He's someone that I definitely have a high share of, especially in a couple of dynasty leagues. I even traded for him and got him in different ways. So I'm pretty all in on him. Obviously, the talent is unquestioned. He only had a hiccup in his career due to off-field stuff. He's as good as they come as a running back goes.
Ken, what's the most that you've paid for Hunt in your dynasty leagues? You said you traded for him in a couple of spots. What is the most that you've paid for him?
Oh, that is a good question. I might have to go look. If I remember correctly, it was part of a super big trade. Like there was like 4 or 5 pieces on each side. So it might have not been like a real exact price.
Okay, so then how about in terms of rookie picks for this year? What's the highest pick that you would give for Hunt straight up?
Ooh, I think I would probably trade like a very early second for him this year. I think I'd trade it as much as that if they wanted it. I think you can get him for cheaper, maybe more like a mid-second, depending on who you're talking to. But
I agree.
yeah, I think that I would be willing to pay that and a little more if they really pushed me.
Yeah, I mean, and he's somebody that, especially after this year, he's definitely. I can't imagine the Browns bring him back again for another year after this year. So
yeah,
he could be somebody that lands in a spot that where he takes over that starting role. So. Yeah, I think that's an interesting one. Not one that is gaining a lot of buzz, at least currently. So,
yeah.
Who is your favorite sleeper right now?
Ooh, sleeper. We talking like double-digit rounds type sleeper?
Yeah. Let's say 10th round and beyond.
I think. Ooh, man, that's a good question. I doubt he stays there for much longer, but I think Deontay Johnson would be a good guy in this sort of range. I've seen some people talking about him on Twitter, so I'm sure by the time we're drafting in the fall that his ADP is going to skyrocket. But for now, anyway, he's a sleeper. In the fact that they just drafted Chase Claypool. You got Ben Roethlisberger coming back to the offense. Juju Smith-Schuster's the one there. People thought James Washington was going to be, but then by the end of the year, Deontay Johnson had kind of stepped into that role. So if he can continue that and kind of keep both Washington and Claypool out of the picture, and not to mention, they also signed Eric Ebron as their tight end. So maybe that's another way he could lose targets, but I think he's a lock here for a decent amount of target share.
You're not going to hear any issues from this side because I am a Deontay Johnson truther, and so I love me some Deontay Johnson. So
he looks really good he just has that style of play that just every time he catches the ball, you're like, wow, like he just looks good doing what he does.
No doubt. And I think, there's been those rumors going around that Juju may not be there after this year. So, I mean, he could end up being the wide receiver 1 after this year.
Yeah, it's not a bad idea.
So, yeah. All right. So, on this next one, I want you to give me the most bold prediction, the scorching, melt your face off like napalm prediction for 2020.
Kyler Murray is going to be this year's Lamar Jackson. And Lamar Jackson's going to be outside the top 5.
Oh, see, you went spice.
I went with a
combo.
I went with a combo.
The 1-2-piece chicken dinner.
Yeah, I love Lamar Jackson. I really do. I know that rushing is the cheat code for quarterbacks, and obviously he's really good at it. I'm worried that the Ravens don't, as a team, have as much success running the ball, even though they drafted J.K. Dobbins, even though they still have Mark Ingram, even though they've got a couple other running backs and a solid O-line and everything. It's running the football, and we can get in a whole conversation about this in the NFL side of things, but running the football just typically doesn't continue to be successful. You can be successful for short stints and separate variations, but if they're not able to get that going and keep it going like they did last year, they're going to run into problems, and they're going to have to rely on Lamar as a passer. He is a good passer. Don't get me wrong. He is not an elite passer. So if he gets stuck having to throw the ball, they're going to run into more problems than they did last year, relative to how they did. And obviously that was like a perfect storm of fantasy relevance for him. And he was throwing what was his touchdown percentage? Like 7? Like it was like huge. So I don't see that happening again. And Kyler Murray, he gets DeAndre Hopkins this offseason. They're on an upcoming offense. He had an outstanding rookie year, honestly, all things considered. And if he's able to take that next step, which seeing what I saw and seeing the numbers that he put up, I see no issue with him being able to do that with his wide receiver core the way it is. And, Kenyon Drake's there, and he spiced things back up for them later in the year. I mean, they look good. That offense was really rolling at the end of the year. So he could take a next step up, and he's instantly a top 5 quarterback. He's arguably, I think Lamar Jackson's still quarterback 1 in Dynasty, but Kyler Murray's a very close number 2.
Really, Lamar Jackson is QB1? I would think that'd be Patrick Mahomes.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah. Okay. Well, you might get.
Well, I'm certain there's probably a debate there.
Okay.
On which one would we want, right?
I'll go Mahomes 1, Jackson 2, Murray 3. I'll go with that. I'm with that. Just because he's the better he's the best passer.
Is that fair, Cody? Is that how you see it?
I probably have Dak at 3, but there's definitely an argument to be had for Kyler for sure.
Dude, the Dak contract stuff right now is just throwing me for a loop. I love Dak. He's a great player. I just don't know what's going to happen with him. And if he doesn't re-sign with the Cowboys, you don't know where he's going to end up, and that can instantly tank his value. So that's my only Dak criticism right now, but it's not based on the player whatsoever.
Do you think the report that they offered him 5 years, 175 is true?
So a lot of people are reporting that he wanted X. I don't even know what the numbers are anymore. He wanted X amount of dollars, and it was only this many dollars per year. And that's hardly ever the real reason that these quarterbacks don't take contracts. It's usually because of the structure or, when the outs are plugged in there and incentives and all sorts of, there's so much stuff that goes into these contracts. It's hardly ever just a blanket statement. Oh, I want $45 million a year. And if it's not that, I won't sign. That's hardly ever the basic issue. So I don't know. Maybe he was offered that, but the guaranteed money was not very good, and he was only really guaranteed 2 years of it or something like that. I guess we just don't know until we get real contact details. But it's possible that he turned it down, and it was just a poorly structured one where that was potential salary, but he just wasn't ever going to be able to get to it.
Yeah, it's just, I don't know, 40. If he's really wanting $45 million a year, that just seems a little high. Because that's kind of like the Patrick Mahomes territory of money. Because these guys can only get so high, right? Unless the salary cap is going to, I know it's supposed to go up once the new CBA and everything. Yeah. But I know that Patrick Mahomes has talked about it, and his agent has even talked about it, that Mahomes doesn't really want to break the bank. That's not what he wants to do. He cares more about winning than he does about necessarily the money. He's still going to get paid, right? And let's be honest, Mahomes is crushing the endorsements. He is all over everything here. And so, but I do think that is something that is kind of an interesting conversation. Like, I think these guys should get whatever they can get, right? But at the same time, like, you have to get to a point where, okay, we're going to give you, say they did give Dak $50 million, well, a year. I mean, then what do you do with the rest of the team? Then, I mean, you can't build a team around it, and then what's the point?
Yeah.
And so, like, I get the give and take to it, because I'm certainly not on the owner side. Because I know there's a lot of fans that I don't ever understand it. It seems like always on the owner side of these things, and I don't think that makes any sense to me at all. Like, the owners are doing fine for themselves, and so the players are the ones putting their body on the lines and should be trying to get as much as they can get. I get that part of it. I just don't think Dak, to me, is worth. If we're saying that's the top of the quarterback scale, I don't think that's where he should be. That's not where he slots in for me.
I completely agree, because I think it was in the last CBA era, if you want to call it that. There wasn't a Super Bowl winner with a quarterback with a cap percentage larger than like 14. And I think, this deal would be in like the closer to 20 range or something, so 18 to 20 range. I don't remember what it is off the top of my head. It'll depend on the cap number for 2020, but it just, paying that much money to one single person, even if it's a quarterback, even if it's the most important position, it's still too much. And it's just too much, resource allocation. And there's not enough to go around anywhere else. And a lot of people just say, yeah, well, then you just draft guys and you rely on young players. And they just don't understand that might not work. In fact, it doesn't work most of the time. So it's tough for them to sink so much money to these guys, even if they're good, even if they deserve it. I wish all these guys got paid exactly what they wanted. I truly do. They all deserve it. They're incredible athletes. But if the cap is in play, it's a zero-sum game. And so the GMs have to treat it that way. And so that's where I'm at. I love Dak. He's an amazing fantasy quarterback and real quarterback, honestly. But I don't know if he's worth that money, to be perfectly honest, from a cap perspective.
I know they've talked about it too, is the fact that a lot of times it's the union that's pushing them to get as much money as they possibly can, and that's actually some of the reason that maybe these players would want to sign for a little bit less. But like, there's so much pressure from the union, because if, like, let's say Mahomes came out and said, "All right, I'm going to sign for $30 million," because he wants to take less to help the team and to be able to keep the team sustainable, that would be a big problem for everybody else, because then all of a sudden all these other teams would expect their quarterback to do that, and what they really want is them to get every last dime they can out of the owner so they can continue to push those contracts up. And so while I guess I understand that, but at the same time, I don't know. I guess as a fan, you just want to see your team continue to win. And as a Chiefs fan, finally seeing a Super Bowl that I never thought I would see in my entire life, like, I want to see more. I want to know what the Patriots, I kind of want to know what that's like.
I was going to say that Mahomes should really go with the Tom Brady model, honestly, if he wants to continue winning, if that's truly what's important to him. Go with the time. I mean, you can still get millions of dollars. Like, what is 30 versus $20 million? It's nothing to me. That's the same amount of money in my mind right now. But obviously, it's a different perspective for them, and I get it. And the union, part of it makes sense too. But if he wants to win, that's how you should do it. Tom Brady model.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like you mentioned, like, no quarterback. I think it's been since, I can't remember, because I know they said it's been like the last 15, 20 years, not a single quarterback that was paid in like the top 5 paid quarterbacks in the league have not won a Super Bowl. Yeah. And I think it just goes to show that. And we continue to see the new model of that you draft the quarterback, you surround him with as much talent as you could possibly get, unlike what the Texans have done with Deshaun Watson. But most other teams have kind of figured that out, that, hey, let's surround this guy with as much talent as you possibly can, maximize that rookie contract window, and then that's when all of a sudden you're going to have to pay everybody, and that's when you're going to kind of have to make a bunch of big decisions to get rid of a lot of players. Yeah. And that seems to be the new model of kind of making it happen. And so we haven't really seen players past that be able to do that outside of Tom Brady.
Mm.
So
yeah, makes sense.
So anyway, and how do you think? Well, actually, this is the last question I want to ask you. What is your thoughts on Justin Jefferson? I just want to ask real quick. As a Vikings, I think that he can easily be a wide receiver 2 this year.
I don't think it's out of the question. There were some early reports that Olabisi Johnson is going to continue to be the number 2 guy there, and that's certainly feasible. He kind of had an okay finish to the year. I don't remember if he was undrafted or a late rounder. He was something pretty much unheard of guy going into last season. But I was very impressed with what he was bringing to the table by the end of the year. And Justin Jefferson, I don't know if you've ever watched his film and stuff, but he's got juice. I mean, he's plays great out of the slot, super smooth, great hands. I think he's instantly able to step into this offense and produce. And so, there's word that he's going to slide into the slot, and Adam Thielen's going to move to the outside, play a little bit more outside. whereas he was kind of like 50-50 before last year and before. So, if we got Adam Thielen on the outside, Justin Jefferson in the slot, Olabisi Johnson on the other outside, or maybe we can get like Irv Smith split out wide while we have Rudolph on playing on the end. That's a pretty good look. That's a good looking offense right there. I think a lot of people were questioning us getting rid of Diggs, but really there's still a lot of receiving talent on this team, and I think Kirk Cousins is able to kind of process through his selections every single down, and he knows what he's doing. So if he can find an open guy there, we're going to get up the field. So Justin Jefferson, I don't know if I'm as wide receiver 2. I'm not sure if I'm on board with that quite yet. I think he'll take a year to kind of step in a little bit, but there's certainly weeks where he could produce. He'll probably be a DFS guy for sure. I had no doubt in my mind.
Oh, now you're speaking my language, DFS. So, anyways, all right. I want to get you out of here because I'm not going to ask you. I keep asking all kinds of questions, but
hey, it's been good. It's been good to get on and rap again, man.
No, I really appreciate you having you come on. I appreciate you telling us your story. It really means a lot to me, especially on this first episode. So I really appreciate it.
Absolutely, glad to be on.
Yeah. So, anyways, but also, this weekend is Memorial Day, so let's do remember that it is not Veterans Day. So I know some people will get a little confused sometimes. It has nothing to do with veterans. It has everything to do with remembering the people that have given up their lives for this country and put their lives on the line. And that's what this weekend is about. It's not about going to your buddy's house and grilling and getting drunk. Awesome to do it. Have fun doing it. But just remember that this is not about veterans. It's not about any of that. It is about remembering the people that have allowed us to continue to have our freedom and to be able to do what we want to do. So just remember that this weekend while you guys are having fun, enjoying your extended weekend. And once again, I really appreciate everybody checking out the first show. We got a lot of guests we have lined up. We're going to be doing this probably through July. And remember, we are partnering with the Wounded Warrior Project. Basically, with them, more than 52,000 servicemen and women physically injured in recent military conflicts. Over 500,000 are living with invisible wounds, from depression to post-traumatic stress disorder. 320,000 are experiencing debilitating brain trauma. Advancement in technology and medicine save lives, but the quality of those lives might be profoundly altered. The numbers speak for themselves because not every warrior can. With the support of the community of donors and team members, they give them a voice of those needs to empower our warriors to begin the journey to recovery. So that is what we're going to be doing. We want to donate to the Wounded Warrior Project. The link will be in the show description, whether it's on YouTube, whether it's in the podcast, and we'll be tweeting it out as well. And then here really quickly, we'll be putting out some shirts as well you can order to donate. So I think it's a good cause, especially with this week and everything going up. Just kind of help some people out, especially the people that, put their lives on the line for us. So again, Kent, I really appreciate you coming on. You can find him on Twitter at Kent Weyrauch, and you can find me on Twitter at FantasyRat13, Cody at C Kutzer, and we will see you guys again next week. Again, have a great weekend. Peace.